The Grand Hall of Harmony Point buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages. Beings from across the galaxy moved between elegant tables, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. The space station served as neutral ground, where different species could meet, trade, and discuss important matters without worry of conflict. Commander Taemin Kong stood near the center of the room, his four arms gesturing wildly as he spoke. His crystalline blue skin caught the light, making him shine like a precious stone. At nearly 8 feet tall, he towered over most other beings in the room. His military uniform was perfect, covered in medals and ribbons that told stories of battles and victories. "You see, the trick is knowing when to strike," Kong said to a group of reptilian Scalafy traders. "We Veltharians have perfected the art of war over thousands of years. Take the Rigel campaign, for example. 3 enemy fleets thought they could challenge our might." The Scalafy listened with respect. Everyone knew about Veltharian military power. Their ships were fast, their weapons were deadly, and their soldiers were trained from birth to fight. Few species dared to challenge them directly. "What happened?" asked one of the traders, his forked tongue flicking out nervously. Kong smiled, showing his sharp white teeth. "We destroyed all 3 fleets in less than 6 hours. Not a single Veltharian ship was lost." The survivors begged for mercy, of course. A small crowd had gathered around Kong. Representatives from the Corvan Empire nodded with approval. A group of insect-like Threks clicked their mandibles in what might have been admiration. Even some of the proud Centauri delegation seemed impressed. "Tell them about the Kepler Nebula," said Lieutenant Haijin Nam, Kong's young aide. She stood quietly beside him, her own blue skin a shade darker than his. Unlike her commander, she seemed more interested in watching the crowd than being the center of attention. "Ah yes, Kepler." Kong's eyes lit up. Now that was a real battle. Some upstart species thought they could challenge Veltharian expansion. They had settled in our rightful territory, you understand. Primitive little beings who barely knew how to build proper spacecraft. The crowd leaned in closer. War stories were always popular at these diplomatic gatherings, especially when told by someone who had actually fought in them. "These creatures thought their simple weapons could match our plasma cannons," Kong continued. "They used metal projectiles, can you believe it, like throwing rocks at a starship? We tried to be reasonable, of course. We offered them the chance to become our subjects, to learn from superior beings." "But they refused?" asked a Centauri diplomat. "They refused?" Kong slapped the table with one of his hands, making several glasses jump. "So we had to teach them their place in the galaxy. It took 3 months, but we showed them the price of defying Veltharian might. They learned to respect their betters." Across the room, Captain Dongwoo Kim watched the scene with growing discomfort. The human diplomat was shorter than most beings in the room, with dark hair and brown eyes that seemed older than his face. He stood next to 2 other humans, both wearing simple blue uniforms that looked plain compared to the fancy clothes worn by other species. "Should we say something?" Kim whispered to his companion. Dr. So-Young Park shook her head slightly. She was a woman in her mid-30s with short black hair and calm eyes. Unlike the captain, she showed no emotion as she listened to Kong's story. Her hands rested quietly at her sides, and she seemed to be studying the Veltharian commander, like he was an interesting specimen. "Let him talk," she said softly. Kim looked uncertain. As the leader of the human delegation, he felt responsible for representing his species properly. Humans were still new to galactic politics. They had only made contact with other species 30 years ago, and many still saw them as primitive backwater dwellers. Kong noticed the human group and smiled. "Ah, we have some of the newer species here tonight." He gestured toward the humans with 2 of his arms. "Come, join us. You should hear these stories. There is much you can learn from Veltharian military history." The crowd turned to look at the humans. Some beings showed polite interest, while others seemed amused. It was well known that humans came from a small, unimportant system on the edge of the galaxy. They had no great military victories to speak of, no vast empire to rule. Kim stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over. "Commander Kong, We appreciate your invitation. I am Captain Kim, representing the Human Colonial Alliance. Human Colonial Alliance? Kong repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them. How charming. Tell me, Captain, what colonies do humans rule? How many systems have you conquered? We prefer peaceful expansion, Kim replied carefully. We establish colonies through negotiation and trade agreements. Several beings in the crowd made sounds that might have been laughter. The idea of expanding without conquest seems strange to many species. Peaceful expansion, Kong shook his head in mock sadness. You see, this is what happens when a species develops too slowly. You lack the warrior spirit necessary for true greatness. But do not worry, you can learn from watching your betters. Dr. Park stepped closer, her eyes fixed on Kong's face. What was the name of that system you conquered? The one with the primitive beings? Kepler Nebula region, Kong answered proudly. 3 small planets, barely worth our attention. But principle matters, you understand. We cannot allow inferior species to claim territory that rightfully belongs to advanced civilizations. And when did this battle take place? Park's voice remained calm and steady. Kang waved one hand dismissively. Oh, many years ago. Before your species even knew other beings existed, I am sure. 23 years, perhaps 24. Time moves differently when you have achieved as much as we Valtharians have. Park nodded slowly. She looked down at her arms, then back at Kong. I see. You are very quiet, Kong observed, focusing his attention on her for the first time. Most beings find our military history fascinating. Are you perhaps overwhelmed by the scale of Valtharian achievements? The room grew quieter as other conversations stopped. Many beings turned to watch the exchange between the tall, confident Valtharian commander and the small, calm human woman. Not overwhelmed, Park said. Just thinking. Thinking about what? Park looked around the room, meeting the eyes of various beings. She seemed to be making some kind of decision. Then, slowly, she began rolling up the sleeve of her left arm. I was thinking about scars, she said quietly. Her sleeve revealed pale skin marked by a distinctive pattern of lines and circles. The scar tissue was old but still clearly visible. It looked like it had been made by some kind of energy weapon, something that had burned deep into flesh and muscle. Park held up her arm so everyone could see it clearly. Then she looked directly at Kang, her calm eyes meeting his confident gaze. That is from the war your planet lost, she said. The room fell completely silent. The silence in the grand hall was so complete that the soft hum of the space station's life support system seemed loud. Every being in the room stared at Dr. Park's scarred arm, then at Commander Kong's face. The Valtharian's confident smile had frozen in place, but his eyes showed confusion. Kang let out a loud laugh that echoed off the walls. Lost? Valtharia has never lost a war, human. You must be confused. Perhaps you injured yourself in some accident on your primitive world. Park kept her arm raised, showing the distinctive pattern of burn marks. No accident, Commander. Valtharian plasma rifle, Model VX-7, standard issue for your Marines 23 years ago. Lieutenant Nam stepped closer to her commander, her datapad already in her hands. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen as she searched through military records. Her face grew pale as she read. That is impossible, Kong said, but his voice had lost some of its strength. Valtharians do not fight humans. We have had no contact with your species until recent years. You had contact? Park said quietly. You just do not remember it the same way we do. An elderly human stepped forward from the crowd. His hair was white, and his face showed the lines of many years. Unlike Park and Kim, he wore formal diplomatic robes that marked him as someone important. Ambassador Lee, Kim said with respect. Perhaps you should explain. Ambassador Jinwoo Lee nodded slowly. His eyes were fixed on Park's scar. I know that mark, he said. I saw many like it during the 3-month war. 3-month war? Asked one of the Scalathi traders. We have never heard of such a conflict. Lee looked around the room at the gathered beings. 23 years ago, Valtharian ships appeared in human space, 3 colony worlds in the Kepler region. Your commander is correct that it involved planets barely worth attention. Small farming settlements, mining operations, research stations. Kang's confidence was returning, you see? A minor police action. Hardly worth calling a war. Police action, Park repeated. Is that what your history books call it? Lee continued his story. The Veltharian fleet commander demanded immediate surrender. He said humans were too primitive to govern themselves. He gave our colonists 1 day to evacuate or become subjects of the Veltharian Empire. Generous terms, Kong said. We could have simply taken the planets without warning. The colonists refused, Lee said. 60,000 humans on 3 worlds chose to fight rather than leave their homes. Several beings in the crowd made sounds of surprise. Fighting against Veltharian military might seem like suicide. Everyone knew their technology was far superior to most species. How many Veltharian ships? Asked the Centauri diplomat. 3 full battle fleets, Lee answered. Nearly 200 ships, 40,000 trained marines. The latest weapons and armor. The crowd grew more amazed. Such a force could conquer most star systems with ease. Lieutenant Nam looked up from her datapad, her face now very pale. Commander, she whispered, these dates match Operation Starfall. Kang turned to his aide sharply. What did you say? Operation Starfall, Nam repeated quietly. 3 months of training exercises ... in the Kepler region. The files are classified, but the dates match exactly. Park smiled for the first time that evening, but it was not a happy smile. Training exercises. That is what you call it now. What really happened? Asked Dr. Byung-jin Yoon, a Veltharian in civilian clothes who had been listening quietly from the back of the crowd. Unlike Kang, he wore simple scholar's robes instead of a military uniform. Lee looked at Park, who nodded slightly. Dr. Park was there, the ambassador said. She served as a combat medic with the Colonial Defense Force. There was no Colonial Defense Force, Kang protested. Humans had no military. You were farmers and miners. We were farmers and miners who became soldiers, Park said. We had hunting rifles, mining explosives, construction equipment. We had knowledge of our own worlds and a very strong desire not to become slaves. She walked closer to Kang, still showing her scarred arm. Your Marines landed expecting easy victory. They wore heavy armor and carried powerful weapons. They moved in perfect formations like they had been taught. Proper military tactics, Kang said. Proper tactics for fighting other armies, Park agreed. Not so good for fighting people who refuse to line up and die politely. Dr. Yoon stepped forward, his curiosity obvious. What tactics did humans use? Park looked around the room. We used the land. We knew every cave, every forest, every building. Your soldiers wore bright armor that showed up clearly against trees and rocks. We wore farm clothes that blended in. Cowardly, Kang muttered. Effective, Park corrected. We took apart mining equipment and made bombs. We used farm chemicals to create poison gas. We turned construction robots into weapons. Lieutenant Nam was still reading her datapad. Commander, she said quietly, the casualty reports from Operation Starfall are ... significant. How significant? Kang demanded. Nam looked around nervously. 7,000 kia, 15,000 wounded. Complete loss of the 23rd and 47th Marine Divisions. The room erupted in shocked voices. Such losses were unheard of in modern Veltharian history. Impossible, Kang said, but his voice was weak. Possible, Park said. We counted the bodies. Doctor. Yoon pulled out his own datapad and began searching through files. I have been researching the lost campaigns for years. Military operations that were classified after completion. Operations where entire units were disbanded and their members transferred to distant posts. You studied the war? Park asked with interest. I tried to, Yoon admitted. Official records say these were training exercises, but the evidence suggests something different. Equipment losses, personnel transfers, changes in military doctrine. Something happened during those operations that changed how Veltharia fights wars. Ambassador Lee nodded. After the 3-month war, Veltharian expansion stopped for 5 years. Your military completely changed their tactics, their equipment, even their recruitment methods. Because we learned from you, Park said, looking directly at Kang. You learned that technology alone does not win wars. You learned that desperate people fight harder than comfortable soldiers. You learned that knowing the land is more important than having the best weapons. Kang was quiet now, his forearms hanging at his sides. Around the room, beings looked at the humans with new eyes. These were not the primitive backwater dwellers they had thought. The war ended when Veltharian High Command declared victory and withdrew all forces, Lee continued. They announced successful training exercises and promoted several officers, but they never returned to human space. And humans never spoke of it either. Added a new voice from across the room. Everyone turned to see an old Veltharian in elegant robes walking slowly toward them. His skin was darker blue than Kang's, and his eyes held the weight of many years and difficult decisions. Elder Lim, Dr. Yoon said with surprise, I did not know you were on the station. Elder Jaseok Lim stopped next to Park and looked at her scar. I remember approving that weapon design, he said quietly. I was on the high command during the Kepler operations. The room fell silent again. Elder Lim was one of the most powerful Veltharians alive, a being whose decisions affected entire star systems. You were there? Kang asked, his voice barely a whisper. I ordered the withdrawal, Lim said. After we lost the Third Fleet, I realized we were not fighting a war we could win. Not the way we knew how to fight. He looked around the room at all the staring faces. We called it a strategic training exercise and buried the records. Humans agreed to keep quiet in exchange for being left alone. Park rolled down her sleeve, covering her scar. Until now, Lim agreed. Perhaps. It is time for the truth. Commander Kang stood in the center of the crowd, his forearms trembling slightly. The metals on his chest seemed heavier now, their shine dimmed by the harsh light of truth. Around him, beings from across the galaxy watched and waited to see what he would do next. You are lying, he said, but his voice lacked the strength it had before, all of you. This is some kind of trick. Dr. Park studied his face with the same calm expression she had worn all evening. Would you like me to prove it? How? Kang demanded. A demonstration, Park said simply. Harmony Point has training facilities. We could run a simulation of one. Of the battles from the war. Chief Seo-ho Choi stepped forward from the crowd. The human security chief was a large man with broad shoulders and scars on his hands. Unlike the diplomats, he wore a simple uniform that marked him as station security. The facilities are available, Choi said. Level 7 has a full tactical simulator. It can recreate any battle scenario with complete accuracy. Elder Lim nodded slowly. An interesting idea. Commander Kang, would you accept such a challenge? Kang looked around the room. Every eye was on him. His pride, already wounded, burned like fire in his chest. He was a Veltharian officer. He had trained his entire life for war. How could he refuse to prove his superiority over a primitive human? Fine, he said through gritted teeth. I will show you all how Veltharian tactics work. Choose any battle you want. Dr. Yoon pulled out his datapad again. I have been studying the Battle of New Bizen. 200 human colonists held a mining settlement against 2,000 Veltharian Marines for 6 days. Impossible, Lieutenant Nam whispered. The records exist, Yoon said. Classified, but they exist. The Veltharian force had full air support, heavy weapons, and energy barriers. The humans had mining equipment and farming tools. Park smiled. That same sad smile. New Bizen, I remember that one well. You were there? Asked Ambassador Lee. I was the medic, Park said. I treated the wounded while Chief Choi organized the defense. All eyes turned to the security chief. Choi nodded once. I was a sergeant then, young and stupid enough to think we could win. But you did win, Dr. Yoon said with excitement. The Veltharian force withdrew after suffering 60% casualties. Strategic withdrawal, Kang said automatically. But the words sounded hollow. The crowd began moving toward the elevators that would take them to Level 7. Word had spread throughout the station, and more beings joined the group. Scalathi traders, Centauri diplomats, Threx workers, and dozens of others wanted to see this unusual contest. The tactical simulator on Level 7 was a large room with white walls and a raised platform in the center. Advanced holographic projectors could create any environment, any weapon, any scenario with perfect detail. Chief Choi worked with the station's computer to load the new Besan simulation. The battle took place on Mining Colony 7, he explained as images appeared around them. Rocky terrain, deep valleys, lots of caves and tunnels. The room transformed into a rugged landscape under an alien sky. Hills and cliffs stretched in every direction, dotted with mining equipment and small buildings. It looked like a harsh place to live, much less fight a war. The human settlement was here, Troy pointed to a cluster of buildings in a valley. About 50 families. Miners, farmers, some researchers studying the local geology. Where were the defenses? Asked a Centauri observer. There were none, Park said. No walls, no weapons platforms, no shield generators. Just people trying to make a living. Commander Kong studied the terrain with a professional eye. Good ground for landing troops. Multiple approach routes, no natural barriers. That is what your commander thought too, Choi said. The simulation shifted to show Veltharian dropships descending from the sky. The ships were sleek and deadly, carrying squads of armored marines. They landed in perfect formation around the settlement, creating a circle of overwhelming force. Standard encirclement tactics, Kong nodded with approval. Cut off escape routes, demand surrender, advance if refused. The colonists refused, Park said. Of course they did, Choi added. These were people who had traveled across the galaxy to build new lives. They were not going to give up without a fight. The simulation began to play out the battle. Veltharian Marines advanced in tight formations, their energy weapons lighting up the landscape. They wore heavy armor that could stop most projectiles, and carried shields that deflected energy attacks. Watch closely, Park said to the gathered crowd. See how they move together, perfect discipline. Good tactics for fighting other armies. The holographic humans appeared on the battlefield. They looked small and weak compared to the Veltharian Marines. Their clothes were simple work outfits, and their weapons were old hunting rifles and improvised explosives. This should be over. Quickly, said one of the Scalathi observers. It should have been, Park agreed. But watch what happens next. The first Veltharian squad reached the outskirts of the settlement. The Marines moved carefully, checking each building for threats. Their commander directed them with precise hand signals, and their formation stayed perfect. Then the ground exploded beneath them. The lead Marines disappeared in a cloud of dirt and fire. Mining explosives buried in the road tore through their formation. The survivors scattered, their perfect discipline broken by sudden chaos. Mining charges, Troy explained as more explosions rocked the battlefield. We buried them everywhere the Marines might step. Roads, paths, even inside some of the buildings. Dishonorable, Kong muttered. Effective, Park corrected. The simulation continued. Veltharian Marines tried to advance, but every step brought new dangers. Sniper fire came from hidden positions in the hills. Improvised bombs exploded when motion sensors detected movement. Construction robots, reprogrammed for war, attacked from unexpected directions. They cannot see the humans, Lieutenant Nam observed. The colonists knew every rock, every cave, every hiding place, Park explained. They had lived there for years. The Marines were fighting on ground they did not understand. The battle raged for hours in the simulation. Veltharian forces tried every tactic they knew. Airstrikes, artillery bombardment, frontal assault, infiltration, nothing worked. The humans melted away like smoke, only to appear somewhere else. With deadly effect. Where did they get the training? Dr. Yoon asked in fascination. We did not have training, Choi said. We had desperation, and we had each other. Explain, demanded Kong. Park gestured to the holographic battlefield. Your Marines were soldiers, professionals who followed orders and used proper tactics. Our people were families. They fought for their children, their homes, their future, different kind of motivation. The simulation showed human colonists using every tool at their disposal. Farm chemicals became poison gas. Construction vehicles became mobile weapons platforms. Even the children helped by carrying messages and supplies through tunnels the Marines could not find. The Valtharian force should have won easily, Dr. Yoon said, reading from his datapad. Superior numbers, better weapons, full air support? Should have, Park agreed. But they were fighting the wrong kind of war. By the third day of the simulation, the Valtharian casualties were mounting. Marines who had never faced serious resistance found themselves trapped in a nightmare of invisible enemies and constant danger. Their perfect formations became liability when every movement could trigger an explosion. The Marines started making mistakes, Troy observed. Fear makes people careless. Fear? Kang looked offended. Valtharian Marines do not feel fear. Everyone feels fear, Park said quietly. The difference is what you do with it. The simulation reached its climax on the sixth day. The remaining Valtharian Marines, reduced to less than half their original strength, made one final assault on the settlement. They fought with desperate courage, pushing through mines and sniper fire to reach the human positions. They found empty buildings. Where did the colonists go? Asked a Threx observer. Underground, Troy said. The whole settlement was connected by mining tunnels. While the Marines were fighting shadows above ground, the real defenders were moving freely below their feet. The final scene showed Valtharian drop ships arriving to evacuate the survivors. The proud Marines who had landed 6 days earlier were now broken and defeated. They left behind their dead and most of their equipment. As the ships lifted off, human colonists emerged from the tunnels. They began salvaging Valtharian weapons and armor, adding them to their growing collection of captured equipment. The simulation ended. The room returned to its normal white walls, but the silence stretched on. Everyone stared at Commander Kong, waiting for his response. One battle, he said finally. You won one battle. Park looked at him with something that might have been pity. Commander, that was one of our smaller victories. Smaller? Lieutenant Nam's voice was very quiet. The Battle of New Bizan lasted 6 days and involved 2,000 Marines, Park said. The Siege of Haven Station lasted 3 weeks and cost Valtharia an entire fleet. She paused, letting the words sink in. We won every single battle of the war. The white walls of the simulator room seemed to close in around Commander Kong. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides as he stared at the spot where the holographic battlefield had been moments before. The metals on his chest felt like weights, pulling him down. Every battle, he whispered. You won every battle? Dr. Park nodded. 17 major engagements. Dozens of smaller fights. Your forces never achieved a single tactical victory during the entire war. Lieutenant Nam dropped her datapad. It clattered on the floor, but she did not pick it up. Her face was pale blue instead of its normal darker shade. The casualty reports I read earlier? Those were just from one operation. Operation Starfall was the first wave, Chief Choi explained. 3 battle fleets. After you lost them, Valtharia sent reinforcements. How many reinforcements? Asked Dr. Yoon, his scholar's curiosity overcoming his shock. Elder Lim stepped forward. His old face looked tired, as if carrying the weight of these secrets for 23 years had been a heavy burden. 7 fleets in total, nearly 600 ships, 80,000 Marines, pilots, and support personnel. The gathered crowd made sounds of amazement. Such a force could conquer most civilizations in the galaxy. What happened to them? Ascalathi. Trader asked. They died, Park said simply. Most of them, anyway. The survivors were evacuated during the final withdrawal. Commander Kong found his voice again. Impossible. Such losses would be remembered. There would be monuments, memorials, records of the fallen. There are, Elder Lim said quietly, hidden away in classified archives. listed as training accidents, equipment failures, and space navigation errors. Families were told their sons and daughters died serving the Empire, but not how or where. Dr. Yoon was frantically searching through his datapad. The personnel. Transfers after the Kepler operations. Entire units disbanded. Officers reassigned to distant posts. I thought it was routine reorganization. It was damage control, Lim explained. Anyone who fought in the war was scattered across the Empire. No large groups were allowed to stay together where they might talk about what really happened. The survivors were sworn to secrecy, Park added. Those who refused were given early retirement or assigned to posts where no one would listen to their stories. A new voice spoke from the back of the crowd, but some of us remembered. Everyone turned to see an elderly human woman walking slowly. Toward them. She wore a simple gray uniform with medical symbols on the collar. Her hair was white, and she moved with the careful steps of someone whose body had been through many battles. General Shin, Ambassador Lee said with surprise. I did not expect to see you here. General Mikyung Shin stopped next to Dr. Park and studied her scar. VX-7 plasma rifle, close range. You were lucky to survive. Lucky to have a good doctor, Park replied with a small smile. You two know each other? Asked Captain Kim. Dr. Park served under my command during the war, General Shin explained. She was one of our best field medics. Saved more lives than I can count. Kong stared at the elderly human woman. You commanded human forces? I commanded the Colonial Defense Force, Shin said. All human military operations during the 3-month war fell under my authority. There was no Colonial Defense Force, Kong protested weakly. Humans had no military organization. General Shin smiled, but it was not a kind expression. We created one when we needed it. Farmers became soldiers. Miners became explosives experts. Teachers became intelligence officers. When people fight for their homes, they learn very quickly. Dr. Yoon looked up from his datapad, his eyes wide with excitement. General, I have been studying the war for years, but the human side of the story is completely missing from our records. How did you organize such an effective resistance? We did not organize it, Shin said. It organized itself. When Veltharian ships appeared over our colonies, people came together naturally. They shared knowledge, resources, skills. No one had to order them to fight. But the tactics, Yoon pressed. The coordination between different settlements, the supply lines. Someone had to plan all of that. Park spoke up. We used civilian communication networks. Mining companies, farming cooperatives, research stations. They all had their own ways of talking to each other. We just used what was already there. And the weapons? Asked Lieutenant Nam, her voice barely above a whisper. We made them, Chief Choi said. Mining explosives for bombs, industrial chemicals for poison gas. Construction robots reprogrammed for combat. Every human colony had everything we needed to fight a war. Elder Lim looked around the room at all the staring faces. This is why we covered up the war. Not just because we lost, but because of how we lost. Humans showed the galaxy that advanced technology means nothing if the enemy refuses to fight by your rules. Other species began asking questions after. Veltharia's sudden change in military policy, General Shin added. If humans could defeat Veltharian forces, what else might primitive species be capable of? A Centauri diplomat stepped forward. Are you saying that Veltharia has been exaggerating their military capabilities? Not exaggerating, Lim said. Carefully. Veltharian technology is still superior to most species. Our weapons are powerful, our ships are fast, our soldiers are well-trained. But the war taught us that none of that matters if you do not understand your enemy. What did you learn? Dr. Yoon asked, General Shin answered. They learn not to attack someone else's home unless you are prepared for them to fight with everything they have. They learn that desperate people are more dangerous than comfortable soldiers. Most importantly, they learned that some species would rather die than surrender. Commander Kong had been silent for several minutes, but now he looked up at the General. If you won every battle, why did the war end? Why did you not destroy us completely? Because we are not conquerors, Park said. We never wanted to hurt anyone. We just wanted to be left alone. The war ended when Elder Lim contacted me directly, General Shin explained. He proposed a treaty. Valtheria would withdraw all forces from human space and never return. In exchange, humans would not tell anyone what happened. Why did you agree? Asked Ambassador Lee. Because we knew what would happen if the truth came out, Shin said. Every oppressed species in the galaxy would realize they could fight back. Every subject world would start thinking about rebellion. The galaxy would explode into chaos. Elder Lim nodded slowly. It would have meant the end of established order. Billions would have died in the wars that followed. So you both agreed? To lie, Captain Kim said. We agreed to peace, General Shin corrected. The lie was just the price we paid for it. Dr. Yoon was still reading his datapad, but some things could not be hidden. The changes in Valtherian military doctrine, the new emphasis on intelligence, gathering and local knowledge, the development of non-lethal weapons for civilian populations. We learned, Lim admitted. Everything about how we fight wars changed because of what humans taught us. We became better soldiers because you defeated us. And humans remained in the shadows, Park said. Classified as a minor species, no threat to anyone. Just peaceful farmers and miners who happened to live on the edge of the galaxy. The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed the full scope of what they had learned. A war that changed the course of galactic history, hidden away for over 2 decades. A species of apparent primitives who had defeated the galaxy's greatest. Military power through sheer determination and clever thinking. Why reveal the truth now? Asked a Threx observer. General Shin looked at Elder Lim, and some kind of understanding passed between them. Because, Lim said slowly, it is time for humans to take their rightful place in galactic society. And because we have a proposal to make. What kind of proposal? Captain Kim asked. Elder Lim smiled for the first time that evening. An alliance. Between equals. The word alliance hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Every being in the simulator room seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Commander Kang stared at Elder Lim with wide eyes while Lieutenant Nam picked up her datapad with shaking hands. An alliance? Captain Kim repeated slowly. Between Valtheria and humanity? Between equals, Elder Lim emphasized. Not as masters and subjects, but as partners who understand each other's true capabilities. A Scalathi trader stepped forward, his scales rippling with nervous energy. If this is true, if humans really defeated Valtherian forces, then everything we know about galactic power is wrong. Everything you think you know, General Shin corrected. The truth has been there all along, hidden in classified files and covered up by both our governments. Dr. Yoon was frantically taking notes on his datapad. This changes everything. Military doctrine, diplomatic relationships, trade agreements. If humans are not the primitive species we thought, we never were primitive, Dr. Park said quietly. We were just new to space travel. There is a difference between being technologically young and being unable to fight. Admiral Wujin SEO materialized in the room as a hologram, his image flickering slightly as the communication system established connection. The current commander of the Valtherian fleet was younger than Elder Lim, with the bearing of someone who had earned his position through skill rather than politics. Elder Lim, the Admiral said, I received your emergency transmission. Is it true? Are we really discussing full disclosure of the Kepler operations? It is time, Admiral, Lim replied. The secret has been kept long enough. Admiral Seo looked around the room, taking in the mixed crowd of species. His eyes lingered on General Shin, studying her with professional interest. General, I have read classified reports of your tactics. Even our current war college studies your strategies, though they do not know the source. Your officers learned well, Shin acknowledged. Valtherian military performance improved significantly after our war, because we learned from the best. Teachers, Seo said, an enemy who defeated us completely. Another hologram appeared next to the Admiral. This one showed a middle-aged human woman in formal government robes. President Nunji Kang had short gray hair and tired eyes that suggested she had been woken up for this emergency communication. Ambassador Lee, the president said, your message was unusual. Are we really considering ending the secrecy agreement? The secret is already out, Madam President, Lee replied. Too many people know the truth now. We can either control how the information spreads or let rumors and speculation do it for us. President Kang looked at General Shin. General, what is your assessment? Are we ready for the galaxy to know what really happened? We have been ready for 20 years, Shin said. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for us. Commander Kang finally found his voice again. If humans are revealed as a major military power, everything changes. Trade relationships, territorial agreements, defense pacts. Species that have been treating you as inferiors will suddenly see you as threats. Or as potential allies, Dr. Park suggested. Not every species in the galaxy is happy with the current power structure. Lieutenant Nam looked up from her data pad. Commander, I have been reading through more classified files. Operation Starfall was not the only engagement we failed to win. There were 17 other operations during the same period, all classified as training exercises. 17 defeats, Tang whispered. 17 lessons, Admiral SCO corrected. Each one taught us something new about warfare, about our enemies, about ourselves. A Centauri diplomat spoke up. Admiral, if Eltheria has known about human military capabilities for over 2 decades, why maintain the deception? Why not form an open alliance years ago? Elder Lim and President Kang exchanged looks across the holographic connection. Some kind of understanding passed between them. Because the galaxy was not ready, President Kang said. Too many species benefit from the current system, where power is based on technology and territorial control. If smaller civilizations learned, they could resist through determination and clever tactics. Every oppressed world would start a rebellion, Admiral SCO finished. The established order would collapse into chaos. But the galaxy is changing, General Shin observed. New species make contact every year. Old alliances are weakening. The system that worked for centuries is starting to break down anyway. Doctor. Yoon looked excited as he read through his research. The signs were always there. The Eltharian expansion stopped after the Kepler operations. Your military doctrine changed completely. You began developing non-lethal weapons and negotiation protocols, instead of just conquest strategies. We learned that some fights are not worth winning, Elder Lim said, and that the strongest enemies are often those who have nothing left to lose. President Kang turned to address the entire room. If we are going to do this, if we are going to reveal the truth, then we need to do it properly. A formal announcement. Full disclosure of the war records. And most importantly, a new framework for human participation in galactic affairs. What kind of framework? Asked Captain Kim. Admiral SCO stepped forward in his holographic form. Full membership in the Galactic Council. Recognition as a major power. And most importantly, a mutual defense treaty between Veltheria and humanity. The crowd erupted in surprised voices. Several beings began talking at once, asking questions and making observations. The implications were staggering. A Threx worker clicked his mandibles nervously. If humans join the Galactic Council as equals, it will change the balance of power completely. It will change more than that, said Chief Choi. Other species will start asking questions about their own capabilities, about what they might accomplish if they stopped accepting their assigned place in the galaxy. Dr. Park walked over to Commander Kang, who still stood in shocked silence. Commander, what will you do now? Now that you know the truth? Kang looked at her for a long moment. I would like to learn, he said quietly. I would like to understand how you fought that war, how you won against impossible odds. Why? Park asked. Because, Kang said, his voice growing stronger, if I'm going to serve in an alliance between our species, I need to understand what makes humans such dangerous enemies and such valuable friends. Lieutenant Nam stepped beside her commander. I would like to learn too. The tactics you used, the strategies. Our war colleges teach Veltharian methods, but they do not teach us how to think like humans. General Shin smiled. That can be arranged. In fact, I have been hoping for years that we could share knowledge openly instead of hiding it in classified files. President Kang addressed Admiral SCO. Admiral, are you prepared to begin formal alliance negotiations? I am, SCO replied. But first, we need to address the immediate situation. Word of tonight's revelations will spread quickly. We need to control the narrative before rumors and speculation make everything worse. Elder Lim nodded. I propose a joint announcement within 48 hours. Full disclosure of the war, acknowledgement of human military capabilities, and declaration of formal alliance talks. Agreed, President Kang said. The room began to buzz with excitement and nervous energy. Beings from different species talked in small groups, discussing what this would mean for their own civilizations. Some seemed worried, others excited, but all were fascinated by the dramatic shift in galactic politics. Dr. Park found herself standing next to Dr. Yoon, who was still frantically taking notes. Doctor, what will you do with all this information? Write the true history, Yoon said without looking up from his pad. Both sides of the story. What really happened during those 3 months and how it changed everything that came after. Will anyone believe it? They will have to, Yoon said, finally looking up at her. The evidence is too strong to deny. And besides, people deserve to know the truth. Across the room, Commander Kong was talking quietly with Chief Choi about tactical simulations and training programs. The proud Veltharian officer who had boasted about his war record earlier that evening was gone. Replaced by someone eager to learn from former enemies, General Shin walked over to Elder Lim. Are you sure about this? Once we make the announcement, there is no going back. There was never any going back, Lim replied. The secret was too big to keep forever. Better to reveal it on our terms than to have it discovered by others. President. Kang's hologram flickered as the communication system prepared to disconnect. General Shin, I am authorizing you to begin preliminary alliance discussions immediately. Work with Admiral SCO to establish protocols for military cooperation and knowledge sharing. It will be my honor, Madam President. As the holograms faded and the crowd began to disperse, Dr. Park remained in the simulator room. She looked at the white walls where the Battle of New Bizan had played out just hours before. So much had changed in one evening. Ambassador Lee approached her. Dr. Park, how do you feel about all this? About the truth finally coming out? Park touched her scarred arm through her sleeve. Relieved, she said. I have been carrying this secret for 23 years. It will be good to finally speak openly about what happened. And the alliance? Are you comfortable with working alongside former enemies?